Have you ever just stopped and thought about what's actually powering you right now? I mean, what's powering the very thought you're having or the blink of your eye? Well, it's this invisible, totally silent, but absolutely critical process happening trillions of times a second in pretty much every cell in your body. Today, we're going to plug directly into that molecular power grid.
It seems like a crazy leap, doesn't it? How in the world do you get from the chemical energy locked away in a sugar cookie all the way to an electrical impulse firing between neurons in your brain? There's a bridge between those two worlds, and it's a single, amazing molecule.
And here it is. Meet ATP. This is it. This is the rechargeable battery that powers life itself. Seriously. Without it, everything just grinds to a halt. You see, our cells don't just spend glucose or fat directly. They have to convert that energy into these neat, tidy, usable packets of ATP first. So the real question isn't just what powers us, but how our bodies manage to make this incredible stuff. Let's go check out the production line.
So we're going to take a little journey deep inside the cell. We'll start with why we even need ATP in the first place, then we'll take a tour of the factory where it's all made. We'll see how the fuel gets delivered, watch a super high-stakes electron relay race, see how that race builds up this incredible potential energy, and then, finally, we'll see the amazing machine that cashes it all in. Think of it like this. Almost nothing your body does is free. Every muscle you contract, every time you copy your DNA, it all has a cost. There's a bill to pay. Well, the process we're about to explore, oxidative phosphorylation, is how your body pays all those bills, generating just enormous amounts of ATP to keep you alive.
To find this production line, we have to zoom way into the cell's dedicated power plant, the mitochondrion. Now, this isn't just some simple bag of chemicals. Its internal structure is brilliantly designed and is absolutely key for making energy.
Okay, so take a look here. The mitochondrion has two separate membranes, which creates these distinct compartments. The very center, that's called the matrix. Wrapped around that, you have this highly folded inner membrane. And then squeezed between the inner and outer membranes is the inner membrane space. You got to remember this layout: matrix, inner membrane space, because the entire process we're talking about depends on moving things between these specific spots.
So before the main event can really kick off, the fuel has to be prepped and delivered. And that fuel, it doesn't come in the form of glucose itself. Nope. It comes as high-energy electrons that have been stripped from the food we eat. This whole journey actually starts outside the mitochondrion, out in the main part of the cell, with glycolysis breaking down glucose. The pieces then get brought into the mitochondrial matrix for the link reaction and the famous Krebs cycle. Now, the main point of all these earlier stages is to load up special molecules with those high-energy electrons. Think of them as little energy delivery trucks. And here are our two main delivery trucks, NADH and FADH2. You can think of them as carrying the same cargo, these high-energy electrons, but they drop them off at different spots on the assembly line. NADH pulls up right at the beginning, at complex 1, so it yields more energy, about 2.5 ATP. FADH, on the other hand, shows up a little later in the line, at complex 2, so it generates a bit less, around 1.5 ATP. And that difference is actually going to be pretty important.
All right, now it's time for the main event. Those fully charged NADH and FADH2 molecules arrive at the inner mitochondrial membrane, ready to drop off their precious cargo. And this starts this incredible cascade of reactions called the electron transport chain. It's really like a tiny, high-stakes relay race. And this diagram shows the whole setup perfectly. See those four big protein structures stuck there in the membrane? Those are complexes I, II, I3, and I4. The electrons are going to get passed from one to the next, like a baton, losing a little bit of energy at each handoff. But what is that energy being used for? Let's break it down.
Okay, let's follow the electrons. So NADH arrives at complex I, hands over its two electrons. The energy that's released is used to pump 4 protons out of the matrix and into that inner membrane space. Now FADH2 drops its electrons off at complex 2, which, and this is important, doesn't pump any protons. From complexes I and 2, the electrons are carried by a little shuttle called coenzyme Q over to complex 3. This one uses their energy to pump another 4 protons. Finally, the electrons make it to complex 4, which pumps 2 last protons before handing the now low-energy electrons off to their final destination, oxygen, and that forms water. This right here is exactly why we need to breathe. Now, Complex 3 has this really clever trick up its sleeve. It uses something called the Q cycle to basically recycle an electron, which lets it pump a full 4 protons. It's just a beautiful, elegant piece of molecular engineering that doubles its efficiency.
So, let's just stop and take stock for a second. We've used all this energy from electrons to pump a whole bunch of protons, those are just hydrogen ions, from the matrix into the intermembrane space. So, what was the point of all that? Well, we just built a massive source of potential energy.
This huge buildup of protons creates what we call the proton motive force. Because that inner membrane won't let protons just pass through, they get stuck on one side. So now you have a high concentration on one side and a low concentration on the other. It's both a chemical gradient and an electrical gradient all rolled into one. The best way to think about it is like water building up behind a giant hydroelectric dam. There is immense potential energy just stored there waiting to be unleashed.
And this is the turbine. This incredible molecular machine is called ATP synthesis. It is the only way for those protons to get back down their gradient, to flow from the intermembrane space back into the matrix. And as they come rushing through, ATP synthesis harnesses that powerful flow of energy to do something truly amazing.
So the top part of this enzyme cycles through 3 states: loose, tight, and open. First, ADP and phosphate bind to a site when it's in the loose state. Then, as protons flow through the base, they cause the middle part to literally rotate, which forces that site into a tight shape. Now here's the crazy part. In this tight state, the ADP and phosphate are squeezed together so powerfully that they just spontaneously form ATP. No energy needed. So what's the proton energy for? Well, the final rotation forces the site into an open state, and this is where the energy is used, to physically kick out the newly made ATP, which is really stuck to the enzyme.
So let that sink in. The crucial point is that the energy from that huge proton gradient isn't actually used to make the ATP bond. That just happens for free. The energy is used to get the finished product to let go of the machine. It's just a stunningly clever and totally counterintuitive solution.
Okay, so after all of that intricate, beautiful molecular machinery, what's the final tally? What's the payoff for all this work we just did?
For every single little acetyl unit that goes into the Krebs cycle, the whole system, the cycle itself plus oxidative phosphorylation, cranks out about 10 molecules of ATP. That is just astonishingly efficient. It is why aerobic respiration, the kind that uses oxygen, is so much more powerful than any other way of making energy.
So the next time you take a breath, just remember what that oxygen is really for. It's the final stop for electrons in a relay race that powers a proton pump, which turns a molecular turbine, which spits out the ATP that is, right this second, allowing you to understand this very idea. It's an ancient, non-stop molecular dance, and it's happening inside you all the time. I mean, what could possibly be more fundamental to being alive?